Hello and welcome to Really Cool People, a podcast produced by Schweitzer Church. I'm your host, Jason Leininger. This is a place to hear stories of really cool people. And the hope is that as you and I listen, we'll be inspired, encouraged, and challenged through moments of serendipity. In a sermon entitled The Weight of Glory, C.S. Lewis said, "There are no ordinary people. You and I have never talked to a mere mortal. It's my joy over the next few moments to introduce you to somebody who may seem somewhat ordinary to themselves, but they're a really cool person. Today, we are going to meet Ed Goeke. Ed is going to talk about an idyllic childhood where he grew up in southern Iowa. And his childhood included a lot of music, which would shape his vocation and a lot of other interests in life. I encourage you to lean in with me, and let's meet Ed Goeke. Welcome, Ed. Glad to have you in studio today.
Well, thanks, Jason.
Yeah.
I'm honored to be here.
Let's start with your story.
Okay. Well, if you start at the very beginning, I am one of 5 children from Raymond and Mary Jane Goeke, born in Kirksville, Missouri. And I was the classic middle child, being the eldest son. I basically did whatever I wanted to. No, just kidding. But I was raised in a very loving family. And both my folks, not surprisingly, were musicians and music teachers. My mother was kind of an original homeschooler, not a homeschooler, a home office person, really, as a private voice and piano teacher. She did that for, I don't know, she did it before she was married. She was teaching at the tender age of 13. She was one of these prodigies, just really got music and was a natural.
What kind of instrument?
Piano, primarily, piano, organ. But her voice was her primary instrument, I guess, a soprano, and she could play and sing beautifully. She always amazed me. And then my dad, Raymond, of course, also studied music, fine tenor voice that he was, so they sang through high school, and the rest is history. They were high school sweethearts, and he received his degree in Kirksville, where they attended schools. Back then, I think it was called a normal school. It's now Truman University. But anyway, she was, I think, finished with her second year and married, and back in those days, that's all it took. Was she was married, she quit school but never quit teaching and really blessing others with amazing gifts. So she had 70 years, I think, of teaching under her belt before she finally hung it up. They lived in Goeke, Iowa, most of their lives. It's a little river town.
Say that name again?
Goeke.
Wow.
Now, if you're not from the town,
Okay.
it would be Keokuk, but Goeke is how everyone pronounces it. That is native to those digs. Southeast corner of Iowa on the Mississippi. And they soon became big fish in a little pond. As music teachers, they were rubbing elbows with all kinds of folks and they had a great influence over the community. I like to tell people when they ask me about my musical background, I tell them I was raised on or weaned on musical theater. Because they both were quite involved in the community doing what they called a summer drama music workshop. My dad created this in a collaborative manner with other teachers, other faculty that he knew, and it went at least 18, 19 years under their tutelage. My mom was always there to provide accompaniment for rehearsals and for the performance. We hired a small orchestra, or it might have been volunteer, I couldn't really tell you that. But Dad always pulled it together with a whole cohort of people from the community supporting it, while high schoolers got up on stage and did South Pacific and Music Man and all your favorite Rodgers and Hammerstein and everything else under the sun that was available at the time. And we did this for years. As I continued on in my high school and early college years, I knew pretty certainly, almost on a subconscious level, that I was going to be in music. It just came naturally to me. It was what was easy, and I had 2 really great models in terms of how to do music teaching well. So that's what I did.
When they did those summer camps, did they ever bring in professionals from out of state or from other places?
All the casted members, the people on stage, were high schoolers.
Okay.
And again, it's a tribute to this little town's music department and the support from the community. They were also quite involved in bringing the arts to Keokuk through what used to be called the Community Concerts Association. So they sat on several arts council boards and such. And this is a little town of 15, 16,000. It wasn't, as great as Springfield or any other little town you can think of. But they got it done and really brought a lot to bear for such a small community. So, I am very both proud of them and humbled by everything they were able to accomplish in their lives. They came from humble beginnings. Dad from a large Catholic family. He was among 7 siblings. And my mom had 2 sisters, and she converted to Catholicism, I think, even before they married, and became quite devout and shared that gift in churches in Keokuk for years. But she did it for, the jewels in her crown in heaven for the Catholic Church for probably, I want to say, at least 60 years.
Wow.
Yeah, and was involved in parish life that way, and planning worship services, providing support at funerals and weddings, and you name it. She did it all. And, of course, Dad was right there at her side whenever needed. So they were quite the pair.
What kind of task did they ask you to carry in the midst of all that as a young kid growing up, or your siblings?
Well, I think part of how they kept me humble is it was always my job to take out the trash. So the other things that came out of my experience living in a large family, by at least most measures, that's a large family of 7, is that everybody contributed, whether it was Sunday brunch after Mass or whether it was on a camping trip across the country. I mean, you can probably envision this. This is the 60s. Gas is cheap. Volkswagens were very popular, including the Vanagons. We had a Volkswagen bus and a Coleman trailer, a pop-up trailer to get started. And we went to Michigan, Oklahoma, we went to California coast, Knott's Berry Farm, Disneyland, you name it. We just traveled everywhere, and we'd stay at the KOA campgrounds and everywhere else that would take us, and had just this amazing, idyllic, really, upbringing, because right after the musical ended, it was about the end of July. Dad had maybe a good 2, maybe 3 weeks, of summertime without obligation in the schools. And Mom was, of course, taking some time off from teaching, so we'd load the family up, and off we went. Now, as often to see family. We had family in Michigan, we had family in Oklahoma and other destinations. But we just made it work, and so we had a ball. There were a lot of really fond memories around the Volkswagen bus, and all the camp songs we sang on the way, and the things we did. But as we camped, of course, there was jobs to do. So whether it was crank up the pop-up trailer to getting food prepared to getting ice at the office or whatever, everybody had a role, and everybody chipped in and worked. So out of that whole experience, both viscerally as a family, and then indirectly watching my dad and mother work with others in the community, really learned, I think, quite a bit about collaborating, about how, if we're all pushing towards the same end, we can do this together. None of us bring all the gifts, and none of us have to do all the work.
Oh, yeah.
And that was a life lesson that I learned later. Oh, yeah, I lived this. It just comes naturally to me to collaborate with others. In fact, I feel really inadequate if I don't. I just don't feel like, what do I have to offer other than maybe, a few skills. But it just works so much better when I'm working with others.
Well, when you think about music, I mean, just about every instrument can stand alone by itself. But most of them sound better when they're connected to something else, too, right?
And I never desired to be a soloist. I did it when needed, whether it was vocalizing or playing an instrument. But I hear exactly what you're saying, just being brought up in those environments and having the time and the margin to really explore instruments and music in a really great system made a big impact on me. And, of course, I took that on. So if we continue down the path, we all went to college thanks to my dad's insistence. There was never any doubt that we were going to go on. It was kind of expected, and there wasn't really any wiggle room on that, which was fine with me. I was good with that. I was excited about all those different kinds of opportunities. But he put us through what he had then achieved as an instructor at the community college there in that little corner of Iowa, Southeast Iowa Community College. he was quite instrumental in getting all of that established, a founding member, if you will, of the community college system established around, I don't know, the mid-'60s. And he was also quite instrumental in advocating for teachers through collective bargaining and otherwise. I mean, he worked on the state level for higher education faculty of all kinds. It later split into its own little niche, but it was all considered the same at that time. So what started in high schools developed and evolved into a community college system that would be on par with Ozark Technical College here in the Missouri system, I think. But then, and maybe even now, you could get an AA degree, an associate arts degree, and go on and be a junior level, if you will, at different state universities or other places. So that's what we did, every one of us.
Wow.
Because really there wasn't an option. It was the best value forward, according to my dad. So we just did it. And, we did our time and moved on. But it was a great experience. I had wonderful education through the community college there, and nothing bad to say about that. I certainly woke up to a worldly reality that I was no longer a big fish when I went to the University of Iowa in Iowa City. And I'd been to camps, and I'd traveled. I'd gone to Europe playing my French horn, and thought it was pretty big stuff, right? But I got there, and I realized I had a whole lot to learn. In fact, I had a whole lot to unlearn. As a brass major, the thing I chose to do over voice, I had to go through an entire embouchure change. Now, for the uninitiated, that is what you do with a set of muscles on your lips and makes the horn sound good. I had to basically start over. I was about a sixth grade level. I was a junior in college doing all my professional training, playing in ensembles because it was required, and had to start over. And that did not go well for about the first, 6 to 8 weeks of that semester. I was with a TA instead of the actual professor, and maybe I just didn't get along with him, or he didn't know what he was doing, but whatever it wasn't going well. So finally, the professor got a hold of me, and it all started making sense, and he walked and talked me through it. Out of it, I think I became a pretty strong player, strong enough that I actually doubled on the French horn in the top jazz band at the University of Iowa when called for. There's and again, you stop me if I'm going on too much. This is kind of wonky, but in big band, there are several big names in the whole world. One of them is Rob McConnell and the Boss Brass. They're a Canadian group. And they had this amazing big sound, especially in the brass section, and wonderful arrangements, really big in the 70s. The reason it sounded so great is that he would put other brass instruments under the lead trumpet, which is always the predominant part, right? And it always sits pretty high. In this case, he had horn parts written exactly an octave below what the lead trumpet player was doing. So it tested me to be super accurate in the upper ranges. So that really developed my chops quickly because I was highly motivated to get it done. So I was able to graduate as a music education major with the emphasis in horn and brass. But I always had the voice to fall back on. And being raised in a group of singers, people in our hometown used to quip. They called us the Goeke von Trapp family, I think is what they call us. The Goeke von Trapp, based on the Sound of Music, von Trapp
Weren't
singers.
the von Trapps, didn't they relocate to somewhere in Iowa for a while? Or wait, maybe it was Northern California.
Was us. Yeah, no.
Yeah, no. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm just kidding. No, we sang all over town. I just dug some things out of my mom's artifacts. She had an incredible studio of music, and being Depression era children themselves didn't throw out anything.
Yeah.
And so I was going through all the dusty volumes of music, and I found this manuscript that had my name on it, and I pull it back, and I find this tune set to a text. It was some kind of a Boy Scout song that she had me singing somewhere at some point. I have no memory of it, but this is the kind of stuff we did. Just like, okay, we're just doing this. It didn't matter. It was natural as breathing air.
Wow. Go back. You mentioned the embouchure, that you had to change that.
Right.
How did it get? What brought that to the forefront? How did you what did you think about all that? Thinking about I played this one way and now I've got to do.
It was difficult for me to accept it. And that was part of the challenge that I was having going through the change. But in brass playing, sometimes you can use the muscle in your arm instead of the muscles on your face. And that's what I did. I had a pressure embouchure. So I was cramming that thing into my mouth, and there was a ceiling to how good I could get doing that. It also affected endurance and tone and just about everything else. So I knew I wasn't going to get any better, and it was impressive. I mean, you have got to change, or there's no way you can move forward. So I finally accepted. It was very humbling, but I finally accepted I had to change. And you know, for an arrogant 19-year-old or whatever old I was at the time, that's pretty hard to take.
Wow, that's incredibly hard to take.
Yeah. So there were a lot of things that happened to me in that first semester or so in Iowa, but I think it was just a realization that the world's a much bigger place than what I had envisioned it, living in my little hometown and being kind of the top dog, whatever I did. So, yeah, it was humbling, and I wrestled with that. There was a little bit of rebellion going on at that time anyway, and did some things I'm not proud of, but I got through it, and somehow my mother's prayers, as I tell everybody, saved me and got me through it. But the one thing I can share with you spiritually is that I had fallen away from practicing as a Catholic and really had no desire to go to church because now I had the choice.
Right.
Before, it was never a choice. Yeah. Even on those long trips in the Volkswagen bus, regardless of how tired everybody was or whatever, we would end up in a church wherever we were. We'd go to Mass. So it was a pre-dawn conclusion that if you were in this household, you were going to church. All right, so I don't fault my parents for that, but I was rebelling about it at the time, and it didn't take more than about a year or two for me to really feel that hole. There was something missing. So I went back, and I started attending at least church on a Sunday. There wasn't a whole lot more going on other than that because I had 21 credit hours on my docket for semester. Music majors have crazy loads because of performances and such. But anyway.
They have to work about 80 hours to get 21 hours in.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly how it is. Anybody in the performing arts understands that. But it was an eye-opening experience. It led me to new things, and I will say that indirectly it led me to my wife of 43 years. I had been working, again, on several things as an undergraduate, but I had a love of jazz and played bass well enough that people found out and wouldn't leave me alone. Even though I was trying to be just a French horn major, they wanted me to play bass for them. So I did and got involved in the jazz program enough that the jazz studies director at the time had referred me and recommended me for a substitute role in a group that came through town. The Highlander, it was called. It was a hotel on I-80 outside of Iowa City, and they had a lounge. Back in those days, they had lounges with music, live music in it.
Sure.
And so he would come to town, and his bass player was enough of a curmudgeon. He didn't want to travel from Des Moines to Iowa City, 2 hours down the road, probably because of the weather in the middle of the winter or whatever, but he just didn't want to do it. So Scott Smith was his name, who was stationed in or located in Des Moines. That was his hub. He came over with a trio of people, and I was the bass player for the group. So I had to learn by ear most of the time. Now, I knew some of the canon, the jazz standards and such, the songbook of Rodgers and Hammerstein and Hart and Cole Porter, and you go down the list, George Gershwin, all those big American songbook composers were part of what Scott performed on piano. He had an encyclopedia like mine. It just always blew me away. He's just recently passed, but back in those days, he was probably in his 40s at that point, pretty well established. And he was trying to put a group together that he wanted to take on the road. He wanted to get out and perform in places like Vegas and Atlantic City and all these other things. So that sounded pretty good to me as an undergraduate brat, if you will, that was looking at teaching or performing. Well, I was not encumbered by marriage or any other obligation, so I decided, yes, this sounds great, let's do this. So I hit the road with him after I graduated in the winter. Yeah, it was December of 1980 that I graduated with my BA degree. Somehow survived it and finished, and it was the middle of the winter. Teaching jobs were sparse, if there were anything available at that time. I wasn't honestly really even looking because I had this other gig. So I got on the road and performed with Scott Smith, the Scott Smith Four, and really had a blast doing that. Met lots of different people along the way, but one of the mutual friends of the drummer I worked with was my now wife. We met for breakfast one morning after a night, and she was there to meet with her friend. We were at a Village Inn in Des Moines, and I'll put it nicely, we didn't hit it off. She thought I was a jerk. I thought she was, whatever. But it was not instant love or anything crazy like that. We were just, kind of harping at each other most of the time. I don't know why. Maybe I was in a bad mood or something. But anyway, she actually decided to show up either because she wanted to support a friend or because she wanted to hear the group. And so she'd come down and listen to the group. And as history says, the rest is history. She stuck around long enough, realized that there was something special there, and we just kept going. So,
wow,
yeah. So it all commenced for us maybe 11 months later. Then we got married.
You got married in 11 months from your first meeting being not a great one?
It all happened fast.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it all happened fast, and by the grace of God, it is stuck. She's been incredibly loyal to me in any effort that I've put out in terms of music pursuits or anything else. So we've made it work, and no regrets.
Did she have a college education at the time?
She did, and in fact, the reason she was in Des Moines is she was writing grants and starting group homes. This was back when this was a novel concept. As a social worker, she worked with city and other government entities to establish these new ideas called group homes. It's kind of like halfway houses for kids that were, in the juvenile system or foster kids or you name it. Just kids that are falling through the cracks. So the model was they would live together, and that people like Katie and other staff would mentor them or watch over them, make sure they had what they need, and they stayed out of trouble, at least as best they could keep it. They didn't all succeed, but this was the concept at the time, and it was a new one. And she had got it established there in the county, really close to Des Moines.
Huh.
Yeah, Dallas County, I think it's right. She'll probably correct me on that. Anyway, so she was doing this great work, and I could see that she was both not only incredibly smart, but accomplished at what she did, and really cared about people. And to tell them, wow, there's a good-hearted woman. I can spend my life with her. So we got married. We had a one child almost immediately, as often happens. There's a whole story there, but we won't go into it today. But anyway, by about I'm going to say 11, 12 months into our marriage, we had our firstborn, and that was Josh. I was then working at a school because we knew the road wasn't the place to live at the time. I had since then changed bands and was working with a different group, arranging for them and kind of leading the group musically. And out of that came an opportunity for me to be in Chicago and spend the entire summer there. Well, in the meantime, she was expecting our firstborn, living with my parents and my somewhat senile grandmother, and somehow getting to know the family really, really well, really, really quickly. But in her spare time, when she wasn't, having morning sickness or whatever, she was writing, front letters and putting resumes in the mail to see if she could find me a teaching job. And I pretty much owed my first job to her and getting at least my foot in the door.
My goodness.
So then I went to teach in north central Iowa, a little farm town called Allison-Barstow School District, where I had a 5 through 12 band program. We spent a year there. It was a pauper's salary, had our firstborn, but the great blessing to us, and this is something I just still say is providential, because Josh had complications at birth. He ended up in the ICU, and they had to move him from our little Waverly, Iowa hospital to one in Cedar Falls, a much bigger complex. They had more capability. They had an ICU for infants, and so it was tenuous. He was there for 10 or 11 days. And if it hadn't been for the fact that we actually had medical insurance and that this particular pre-existing condition was covered, but not only was it covered, it was covered 100%.
Wow.
We would have probably still been paying it off. Who knows?
Yeah.
But it was providential that somehow the insurance seemed to cover most everything that came out of that childbirth.
Huh.
We then moved because she wanted to go go to school, and for her that meant KU to finish her master's. We moved to Kansas. I took another instrumental and vocal teaching job in Atchison, and then as she attended school, I'd help the kid when I could, and was a full-time music educator in Atchison, Kansas. We then moved to Leavenworth, spent about 8.5 years there, and of course the standard joke is after my 8.5 years in Leavenworth, they let me out on good behavior. But anyway, I had done several things and also pursued, after she finished her master's work, going back and getting more work done. And at this point, I'd kind of figured out, I think I'm more suited to choral music education and vocal. And so I went that direction in my master's level work, went to KU, got my master's work done. About the same time that happened, KU wanted me to come back and pursue a doctorate. Well, Katie was already working for KU as a contractor, doing special work for the social work department. We moved to Lawrence. We spent 12.5 years in Lawrence. And along the way, when I was pursuing upper education and doing some graduate assistant type teaching at the university, I got a knock on the door from a female priest who I'd never met. And her name was Ann Clevenger. Ann was the assistant rector at a church in Overland Park, Kansas. We had a mutual acquaintance or a mutual friend through their current director of music, who was moving on after he finished his work in Lawrence. But we had worked together enough. He knew that I had this specialized skill set, both classical, choral kind of tradition, plus playing in bands. And that's what they were looking for in the middle 90s in the Episcopal Church. So I went there thinking, this is going to be very much part-time. I really need to keep pursuing this advanced degree work, see where it takes me, maybe do some research, so forth and so on. But the good Lord got a hold of me. Because out of it, things started to really happen. I mean, contemporary worship was kind of sputtering at this church. I came on board. It really took off. It really blossomed and grew. And so the responsibilities grew from very part-time to full-time in a pretty quick order, about 2.5 years. So I did that. And then I moved to another congregation in Lawrence so I could be near my kids and family, since the hours were plentiful at this particular parish at the time. And that was a good move because it put me closer to family. Josh at this point was close to graduating from high school, and our second, Katrina, was in junior high. So anyway, we lived in Lawrence for about 12.5 years, raised our kids there in the wonderful community of Lawrence, Kansas. And then Katie, who had been doing all kinds of entrepreneurial kind of things and social work, including running an adoption agency herself, had decided, I need a timeout. This is getting hard. There were several cases, I think 3 in a row within about a 4-month period of adoption mothers that backed out after had signing up and thought we had parents and adoptive parents all ready for them and all this. So long story short, she decided I need a break. She went to work at Starbucks as a barista.
Wow.
Yeah, and this is while I was working again full-time in Overland Park later in my career. And so she was taking a mental health break, so to speak, but it was hard work, and she worked hard. And one day she slipped and fell at work, and it put her on the couch. She was injured. In that time, she prayed about, what's next, Lord? I just don't know if I can go back and do this at my age anymore. And she was looking for a sign. So on an Easter morning, this is more of a story about her and her faithfulness, but it does help propel it forward. I'm working full-time at the church. She's healing from her injury, and she says, I need a sign to know what's next. Do I need to go back into working with people? She always had a special place in her heart for people in the military, because most of her family had served, and some of them had been severely affected by serving. I had a brother who was injured in Vietnam, and it stayed with him his whole life, that whole experience. But having said that, she had a special heart, I think, both working in Leavenworth in the military community with different professionals in social work, but also just in her own family, and had been in conversation with a colleague that she had met when we lived in Leavenworth about going overseas and working as a social worker, a civilian social worker for active military. So long story short, she got the sign she was looking for on Easter morning. She had been to communion, walked out, and the first person she saw, she walked out as a young gentleman who was a son of one of the parishioners there in his full dress A's. He was his full military regalia, hat and all.
Wow.
And she just took that as a sign that, yeah, I need to do this, even though we would be vocationally separated by it, because I couldn't stop what I was doing. It was all going very well and needed to stay. But I wanted to support her, so I did. And so she went, and for about 21 months, she was abroad. She was in Germany working as a social worker. That, again, afforded us some opportunities to see each other in Germany and places around it, and that was all great. It led to several other moves, because we then became almost vicariously like a military family. We moved from post to post. She first moved in Germany. Then she found something closer to home in Manhattan, Kansas. Again, I was still living in Overland Park at that point, that we made it work. And then eventually, my son had children of his own and felt a calling on his life to try to establish a church in inner city Philadelphia. So he's going with what he thought he had as a team with his young wife and firstborn to inner city Philadelphia. We thought, we got to go. We got to go help them. How are we going to do this? She found a job through the VA, so she transferred over to the VA system, and that's what led us there. So that's where we landed in Philadelphia for about 2 years.
What church was he planning in Philadelphia?
He's been with the Vineyard movement,
Okay.
Probably the whole way, and he's currently teaching math now. But that's kind of another story. And you know, we're really proud of everything he's accomplished. He and his wife Kara, they've got 2 sons we live 8 blocks away from.
Wow.
So that's the long story short. We followed our grandkids both to the East Coast and back. There's a lot of things that happen in the interim, but that's the way we found Springfield. Is they came back to Springfield after that venture and reestablished themselves here, and we followed them to Springfield mostly for Katie's retirement. I was still working some, and then we decided, yeah, this is a good place to live. We're glad we're here.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's quite the journey.
Yeah, so we moved a lot, I guess is the point. When the kids were younger, that didn't happen so much, but with it came, some sacrifice. I mean, as you know, as you've moved around, you end up leaving a lot of friends behind, and the distance becomes hard to overcome. It's hard to stay connected when you're that far apart. So it was tough on all of us, but I definitely felt it. I felt out of sorts and not having a place to land. That's why I'm so thankful for the community here at Schweitzer. It kind of helped me reestablish some. These things all take time, but we feel very much at home now here in Springfield.
Yeah, I think about my basement, what it was when we moved in and what it is today, 13 years later. And it's like, there's a whole lot more in the basement now than there was 13 years ago.
That's so true.
Because the kids grow up and you create things while they're there, and then you accumulate stuff. And when you move, you got to deaccumulate things.
Right. My dad had a favored administrator who liked to tell him that a move is worth 2 fires.
Yeah.
You have to liquidate. You have to get rid of things. And so we did that, but how quickly it accumulates even in the 7-8 years that we've gotten here.
And you highlighted something there that's challenging about moving, is that there's friendships, relationships that change, and as they must because of proximity, and so they become different. Have you got some friendships that have changed but that are still sticky over these years?
Yes. A particular couple that we met in Leavenworth during the Leavenworth years. We just went on a cruise with them last year. They are godparents to our daughter. So that one has stuck. I mean, it's just there, and I'm sure listeners will resonate with this. They're just people that you know in your life that even if you've been separated for 10 years and haven't talked much in the last year, you can pick it up right where you left off and just keep going. And that's Kim and Ken Bruns for sure. There are others, but those are probably some of the stickiest. Certainly my now kidney brother. Michael Leftwich, which again, God's providence is amazing. Some people may not know, your listeners may not know, I did donate a kidney. I don't like to brag about it. It just helps tell you how God's goodness is so amazing in that I was feeling that pain of separation from friends and familiar faces and connection when I lived in Pennsylvania. I was kind of on my own and trying to figure out where do I fit in, what should I be doing with my life. Didn't have my relational network, so jobs in my 50s just not easier to come by as other points in my life. But we found ourselves living in a house where we shared common spaces, kind of like a boarding house. And this was shortly before we returned. It was one of these timing issues where Katie was looking for another assignment in the VA system, hadn't found it yet. We're kind of waiting for that while the house sold really quickly. And we had a house and we had to sell it. It sold a lot faster than we imagined it would, so we were out of a place to live. So again, got on my knees at the little Episcopal church that I was attending. A high school friend who was now a female priest, again, was there standing there waiting for prayer ministry after communion, and I saw her. I said, I got to go pray with Carolyn. I got to tell her what's going on. We had 10 days to find a place to live. We had a dog. We had all these possessions. What are we going to do? Well, the very next day after I prayed with Carolyn, she said, Ed, I think I might have something for you. And one of her colleagues, a friend, operated a home that had been the place where they lived, and their mother and father both resided. Father had passed. He was a doctor, but they had all this space, and only their mother, who was starting to get a little senile. And so what they did is they organized it like a boarding house and had one person who was a caretaker for their mother living in this home. And so wayward people like Katie and I had a place to stay. Well, talk about humiliating. I mean, it was a humble experience going from owning your own 3-bedroom house in a nice neighborhood to having a bedroom you shared with the dog and your wife, and then everything else was common space, including restrooms. That was, like we'd gone back to college or something. Mm-hmm. So we were living in this situation. I was trying to work as little as I could, or as much as I could, I guess. Little opportunity as there was there, not knowing when we had to pick up and leave. Met a fellow that also lived there. We shared the love of football. We loved sports and watching it. And we sat down and watched it in the common space together. We quickly became friends. We just bonded over football. And so we had laughs. We had a lot of fun and got to be fast friends. We moved. He helped me with the move. He bailed me out, in fact. I had forgotten to order the packing blankets when I got the U-Haul, and he went and chased them down for me while I continued to try to get this done. Anyway, we had become Facebook friends after we moved away. I think it was 2022, January 2022. He sent out an email blast to all the people he knew that he needed a kidney. I had no idea they had kidney disease. But in my process of discernment, all I was getting is, why not? You should do this. You're blessed with good health. Do this for your friend Michael. And so I did. So we're now kidney brothers, like we say. And so we stay in touch, and we told him we needed visitation rights. So that would impel us both to, get together at least once a year. So we do that.
Where do you meet?
Oh, it depends. First time was after the surgery and all that stuff, which is another story. We didn't actually meet. That was all done remotely. That's an amazing story, really.
You want to just take 3 minutes and talk about that?
Sure. Okay. So when it finally came, the day came, it was about a year later, January 2023, that had all been arranged. I should remind everybody that Michael is his name, lives in Philadelphia. We live in Springfield. Modern medicine and air travel and the stuff brought to bear that you can do this remotely. So I had my procedure. They harvested the kidney here, the here being in St. Louis. It was then transported by flight in the middle of the winter to the hospital facility he was at University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia, where he was ready to receive this kidney. And it all happened within, I guess, about 8 hours.
Yeah.
Amazing, right? But anyway, so the first time we met after all this had happened and he had kind of cleared all the protocols to make sure that he was going to be okay was St. Louis. So you got to see his first St. Louis Cardinals game, and we had a big time in St. Louis. The second time, he came to Kansas City with my Kansas City Royals and such. So, we met here locally. I'm planning to get to Cleveland, which is his hometown, sometime maybe this next year.
Okay.
Yeah.
That sounds great.
But yeah, he's a great guy, great fellow, and certainly a dear friend now. I don't know where we were in the journey, but it's again, these are just examples of God's hand in my life, just the providence, and you can look back and see it now. It's always amazing when you see the little miracles that exist in one's life.
One of the things you've talked about significantly is the role music's had, and from learning it and performing it and teaching it. Some people will use music as like a hobby, but what does somebody do who's a musician? What becomes a hobby in that realm?
Bicycling for me.
Okay.
Yeah. I've always been a little bit of an athlete, but bicycling has just been a natural thing for me. When I was growing up in my idyllic world in Little Keokuk, Iowa, I was working probably by the age of 10 as a newspaper. They call them paper boys back then.
Yeah.
Right. So did that, grew it.
So you threw the paper from the bike?
That's how I started.
Okay.
Then I figured out this is taking too much time. I can do this in a more efficient manner than rolling every paper, folding every paper before I go out and do the route. I had these big chrome baskets on the back of a 5-speed that I rode throughout the route. And, the papers would get wet or they'd be in bad condition and people would complain. And I got to thinking, why not just take those same papers, throw them in those big baskets, jump on your bike, get to a corner, stop, count the number you need, and run them door to door. So that's what I did. I just pedaled to the end of a block. I counted maybe 10 copies of whatever I needed for that block, and I would run and sling them up inside the storm door, which was never locked in those days. The storm door was always open, so you'd sling them in between the storm door, and the main door of the house. Oh, people love that. And, of course, the word spread, and so the route grew. So by the time I was in 7th grade, I had my younger brothers running the route, and I managed the money, because back then they made you handle all the money and collect, right? So we had this little business going on, right? So I was always working, and then it wasn't very long that I was actually working in dance orchestras. This is, again, the habit and the itch. I guess I kind of established a habit of playing gigs in dance orchestras and such very early. By the age of 14, I think, I was playing in bands. And I was probably doing things I shouldn't, but...
Did that pay better than...
That paid a lot better than the
dishing
paperback.
newspapers?
Yes, or any other menial job you could find.
Yeah.
Back then it was standard dues were, I think it was $20 for the gig, but that was big money for a junior high school kid. So, so that was great, and I continued to do that through high school off and on as time allowed. But you pick up other jobs, I guess, is the answer to that, and hobbies, hopefully healthy ones. You hear all the horror stories about the unhealthy habits that musicians and other artists, pick up along the way because you're in that world. But I always loved bicycling, all the way back from when I ran a route. And my brothers and I got into the whole wave that was published by the Des Moines Register, another paper that we used to carry, called the Register's Annual Great Bike Ride Across Iowa, RAGBRAI. It's now over 50 years strong, but I think it got started in 74. We were just coming of age where we could actually do this sort of thing, and we did. We'd pack up the wagon. I can remember all three of us loading up the family station wagon with our camping gear and bicycles and running to the wherever the start place was, right after the Summer Drama Music Workshop had ended. It timed out about right. So that Saturday, by Sunday, we were on the road trying to get to the start of the ride. And so we did that several times together with friends of ours and have all kinds of stories to tell. So that would be the answer there. Bicycling has stuck with me.
And you did that recently, right?
Yeah, I did. After my kidney surgery, I had to prove to myself I could bounce back fast. And so in 2023, it was the 50th anniversary for RAGBRAI, and my brothers were already going, so I said, I'm not going to let this stop me. So I started, I think anybody in rehab knows you just take it one step at a time. I remember I first just see if I could walk down the hotel lobby and back, and then as soon as I was able to walk around the perimeter of an area, I would jump on a bicycle and do the same. So you just take it one step at a time, 1 mile, 3 miles, 5 miles. And eventually I was up to over 500 miles by July. And it was the best thing for me. I had a goal, and I knew I could get there. I'd done it before. I had the confidence to do it if my body would allow me. And sure enough, I bounced right back, kept going. And I did it not only for my own personal edification and just wanted to get back to riding and go with my brothers and such, but I also wanted to send a message that anybody who has the ability to give an organ, like a kidney, can do it and have a perfectly normal life. They really can. And I did it within 6 months. So there's no excuse, folks. If you're able, this is such a gift to people. I'm a big advocate of live donation now.
Yeah. So then, thinking about music too.
Yep.
Do you have songs that you love to play, or do you have songs that you hate to play? You hope you never have to play them again, but you know you will.
Oh my, yeah. I'm not gigging so much anymore. I kind of hung up that hat. I'm open to it, but it just now I'm in a situation where I don't have to earn a living. So that's a very good question. What would I play if I could just play it for the fun of it?
Right.
And certainly I've always had a love of jazz. As a bass player, that's a whole lot more interesting. It feels more like a conversation than functioning as doing a certain thing. There's a lot of pop music that I actually enjoy dancing to, would just rather not ever have to play again in my entire life again. Let's see. In my era, that would be play that funky music, right, boy? Remember that one?
Yeah.
Right. So it's actually a fun little bass line, but it's just like, oh, I've played this hundreds of times.
Okay.
So it's that kind of stuff.
Right.
But I think jazz would be my first love if I could find the right combo. I like singing and playing. That's always a great challenge for me. I love big band, and there's a phenomenon among people that play in large bands with horns and rhythm instruments called kicks band, and that's simply let's play for kicks. Let's read the charts. Somebody brings a book of music, and you sit and you play. And oftentimes you get to practice in public, like at a bar or something like that. Yeah, I know there are places around town that do this. The Missouri Jazz Orchestra is a good example. And I love it. I love listening to it, and I love and being involved playing it firsthand. It's definitely a first love of mine. I was kind of raised in that whole genre as an instrumentalist. Really great teachers exposing us to those sorts of things.
And then what about like favorite musicals, favorite musical theater stuff?
Oh, wow. Well, I have to, and my wife is just the polar opposite on this, but Les Miserables, I just think because of the story, it's such a beautiful story of redemption.
It's almost, I just agonize. I mean, like, it's lovely, but it, like, you just say it and it's like emote so much stuff.
Yeah, it is. It's the gospel to me. I mean, it's amazing. So I cry, like a baby every time I see it. But there's so many great ones. West Side Story is another one, and it's Leonard Bernstein's score that I'm truly in love with. It's a dream of mine to be able to direct that score, just because it's such amazing music, and I know there's a whole suite prepared just for orchestra of that music. So those are two big. It's kind of that golden era that I'm really in love with. All the Rodgers and Hammerstein stuff it's near and dear to my heart, even though I may not really like it. I might think it's kind of sappy or old-fashioned because I grew up with it. It's just that it reminds me of a sweeter, more innocent time, I guess.
Yeah. Oklahoma's going to be in town soon.
Great.
Are you going to see it?
I just might. I played opposite of Ado Annie. What was his name? Will Parker.
Okay.
Yeah. I won't burst into song, I promise. But anyway.
You also mentioned that you like football.
I do.
You got a favorite team?
Kansas City Chiefs.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, lifelong. I can remember when it was a kicking duel back in the 1970s. It was one of if not still, the longest playoff game ever. Went into triple overtime between the Miami Dolphins and the Kansas City Chiefs. They were playing in Kansas City, and Jan Stenerud used to be like ice in his veins, golden, never miss a kick, but it must have been sub-zero temperatures or something. He could not put it through the goalpost to win the game. And their kicker, whoever his name was, ended up winning the game by 3 points. Really? I watched that with my uncles and my dad and probably my brothers. And, we were there for 4 hours in front of the TV watching this, So it was an agonizing defeat, but I've been a Kansas City Chiefs fan ever since.
Well, and they knew some agonizing eras, not just years, but eras.
Yeah.
But it's
so
been
true.
a great era recently.
Oh, no kidding. It's been fun being a Chiefs fan, for sure. I know they lost pretty handily to the Eagles this past year, but I still love watching them. It's great fun.
Sacred music. You got any favorite sacred music?
Oh, my gosh. Well, I'd have to say what instantly comes to mind is Messiah, because, again, that was another thing that we did growing up. My dad would direct a community chorus, Mom would play, and it's in my bones. I know that, and I always pine for it when Advent rolls around. So that's one. As much as I love choral music and sacred music, I really prefer instrumental music. I don't know whether it's just because there's more left to the imagination or there's just something about it. So I'm a big fan of symphonic music. It's interesting you mentioned that. I'm going to give a little plug and shout out to Mid-America Singers that this Sunday will be at First Baptist Church here in town doing a wonderful work by a composer that's name slipped right off my memory here. He's a French composer, and it's the Gloria of his setting. His name begins with a P. You're going to have to edit this out. Francis Poulenc. There we go.
Okay.
Francis Poulenc, again, we've been working hard on this. It'll be with orchestra and choir. It's a really challenging piece for choristers. So it's, as their director, Tom Matrone, good friend of mine, a wonderful director, said, it really puts you in touch with your musicianship. It is something that demands all of your attention. Yeah. And so it's been good. I've really, really enjoyed that experience and enjoyed reconnecting with Mid-America Singers.
And this has been fantastic to hear your story and to just listen to you talk about all kinds of things, manner of life.
Our time is up already?
Well, we could go. I mean, you mentioned many times you had these little caveats, like we could go down that road, we could go down that road, and I kind of want to, but time does speak.
Well, I appreciate it. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks for coming in. Yeah. I like to close with one kind of final answer or one kind of final question, and that is there a word of advice or something that you've lived into, kind of a saying that maybe you find yourself passing along to your own kids or grandkids or to other folks that you found really helpful, meaningful, impactful, and you can share with us?
Recently, for me, I mean, there's probably several things I could say here, but recently for me, my mantra has been to live in the moment, to not to be anxious about anything. Philippians 4, verse that everybody loves. That is kind of my favorite verse. I have to rely on it a lot because I tend to be someone who will ruminate on stuff and have anxiety about it. I think it's a common ailment these days, but it is something I have to remind myself regularly that God's got this. He's in control. He is not only saved you, but He has put you in good places for a number or all my years, really. So I'd say that simply, to live in the moment and let God be God.
That's a great thing to live by. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Well, a great big thank you to Ed for sharing his story. In listening today, I hope you were inspired, encouraged, and challenged, and that you begin to behold the really cool people who are all around you. Today's interview concludes our 5th season, and we are so grateful for all the people that we've had a chance to share their stories. They're really cool people. We are going to take a short break, and by midsummer, we hope to come back with more great stories of really cool people. We encourage you to take a moment and set your podcast player so it's able to receive notifications for when those stories start to come out again. Friends, thank you so much for listening, for tuning in to the stories of really cool people. We hope that these stories inspire and encourage you. Have a great summer. The Really Cool People podcast is produced by Schweitzer Church, Springfield, Missouri. Taylor Likes is our executive producer and editor, and I'm your host, Jason Leininger. You can help us out by liking, reviewing, and sharing this podcast. Until next time, stay cool.